And there's intimacy on the radio, and there's naturalness on the radio that can never be replicated on TV. The marvelous resurgence of radio as a political force in this country.
News-related radio programming is evolving.
There's a huge hole in our dialogue that can be filled by the synthesis of traditional radio and the freedom that comes from a live podcast. You're about to experience Cowboy State Politics live. Here we go. Good morning, my friends, and welcome to another fantastic installment from very high above all the puerile and bombastic twits in the Wyoming mainstream media. This is Cowboy State Politics. I, of course, am your illustrious host, David Iverson, firmly ensconced behind the silver Cowboy State Politics microphone and broadcasting to you from the base of the Bighorns at the Cowboy State Politics Studio in Sheridan, Wyoming. Good morning, my friends, and welcome to the program. Happy Wednesday. To say the least, we have a ton of stuff to cover on today's program. Just to kind of give you a quick roadmap of where we're going. Yesterday, I was sent a video by the lovely Christine, who, I guess I should tell you that we have a friend who is stationed over in the Middle East. I think right now she's in Kuwait. But her first assignment was in Jordan, and she's kind of moved around the entire area. Well, yesterday she sent us a video that was put out by the Wyoming National Guard. It's kind of cool. It's got some rockets and guns and some interviews with a couple of Wyoming National Guard members who are stationed over in the Middle East. So the very first thing we're going to do on the show is I'm going to play that video for you. I think it's pretty cool. It's our Wyoming people over in the Middle East, so why the heck not play it? And then we're going to go to the Judiciary Committee. Now, longtime listeners of Cowboy State Politics will know that I've been on the subject of pornography in libraries for a really long time. And let me just talk about that just real briefly. There is a big difference between educational material and what is straight up pornography, gratuitous, unnecessary sex in the library. And the worst part about this is a lot of these different books and materials are not just in the library, like in the adult section, they're in the children's section. And, I've given you lots of examples on the program of some pretty horrible books that nobody in their right mind would think that a minor child should have any access to whatsoever. So I've got some video from the Judiciary Committee that I'm going to play for you. Also, some amazing audio from the Wyoming Education Association. Those redcoats, they're not even redcoats, they're Democrats. In fact, every year they put out their own legislative rankings of how, all the legislators are doing. And the big joke is if you get a 0 from the Wyoming Education Association, you're probably doing a good job for Wyoming citizens. So anyway, we're going to talk about that. And then, as promised, we're going to have an update talking about all of those association fees that we're trying to get rid of. Yeah, you don't know this, but you are a member of a tremendous amount of associations. That's right, my friends. All of these different organizations and groups that your elected officials belong to, whether it's the Wyoming County Commissioners Association or the Wyoming Association of Assessors or the Wyoming Association of Municipalities, you pay for all of it. All of the dues that go to these groups, you are footing the bill for them. And I'm telling you, my friends, it is a big number. when you add them all up. So we're going to finish up that. And then before the end of the broadcast, we're going to have an update from the big story I dropped on Saturday's edition of the program, the log roll. Yes, indeed. So anyway, we're going to have an update on that. And so lots to do on today's program. I don't know if we'll be able to fit it all in an hour, but we're going to try. And if not, well, we'll go on. So we begin this morning with that video from the Wyoming National Guard. Here it is.
Berserker, Maine. This is Lightning Fires.
Lightning Fires, Berserker, Maine. Ready to receive fire mission.
I'm Major Luke Meyer. I'm the S3 Battalion Operations Officer for the 2-300th Field Artillery Regiment. We deployed in the summer of 2024. Since then, we organized into what is known as Task Force Lightning, which is the only long-range precision fires in United States Central Command. And we're operating out of 5 countries, including Jordan, Iraq, Syria, Kuwait, and the United Arab Emirates. Fun fact about the battalion staff is that every staff primary, to include the battalion commander, is a graduate of the University of Wyoming Army ROTC program. The only staff primary that is not a graduate of the University of Wyoming Army ROTC program was an in-theater extension from Kentucky, who since being with us has been selected to be the HHC 960th commander and become a member of the Wyoming Army National Guard. This is something I've wanted to do my entire life, ever since I was about 6 years old. So, realization of a dream for me. I'm proud to be here, serve my country as a member of the Wyoming Army National Guard. Powder River, let her buck. Alpha 0307, rounds complete.
Lightning Fires out.
Pretty cool, huh? I always think it's interesting to get little videos from the Middle East, but since Agent 29 was over in that part of the world, what'd you think, Ken?
Brings back some memories. It was 30 years ago. You saw some equipment there that I'm very familiar with, and then some other equipment that is new since I was there. But I was reminded as I was watching that leading up to the Gulf War, the Desert Storm, we were pounding Iraq from our position. Right behind us was a MLRS battery. Look it up. And you could lay there on your cot. They fire constantly all night long. I can't even imagine what it would be like to be on the receiving end of that, which is what it was designed to, just completely demoralize. But you lay there on your cot, and as those rounds began to just pepper the other area, they just target a grid square and just pound the hell out of it. You could lay there and you could feel the waves coming through the sand almost like water, and just lay there and just feel that. So you watch the videos, and it's kind of, pop, pop, and you watch the lights. When you're actually there during a live fire exercise, it's tremendous. When it's real, there's an enemy at the other end and one shooting back, it gets real.
Yeah, I bet so. So anyway, we've got a lot of our National Guard people that are deployed in the Middle East. A quick shout out to our friend Carmen Crane, who she's the our friend that I was talking about. She's over in Kuwait right now. So, go ahead and watch the video again, send it to your friends, and probably the best thing that you can do is pray for all of our men and women who are overseas. So anyway, I'll post a link to that video on cowboystatepolitics.com so that you can, you don't have to go search for it. All right, so let's get down to business. For a very long time, we have been talking about what your tax dollars are going to in Wyoming libraries. And and here's the thing, right? Most people are completely unaware about what their tax dollars are being spent on. And in some cases, you'd probably be really, really shocked. On yesterday's program, I told you about a couple of books. Lawn Boy was one of them. That's the worst book I've ever read. But there are others. Like the ABCs of Equality, and there's another one that you've probably heard about. It's called Gender Queer. Well, this subject came up in the Judiciary Committee yesterday, and it's an interim topic that was, I think, and Ken, you can correct me on this if I'm wrong, but I believe the interim topic was suggested by Representative Ann Lucas. She had a bill in this past legislative session that, well, it didn't go anywhere. And so it was suggested that they talk about this during the interim because, again, a lot of this is your tax dollars. And it is very, very clear that there is an agenda being pushed by the radical left in Wyoming libraries. And admittedly, I see an agenda everywhere I look. But in this case, it's probably one of the more nefarious and offensive ones.
I think it's worth prefacing this whole section that it used to be, for example, when I was growing up, yes, we had libraries, and they did not have stone tablets. They had
I was just going to ask you.
Actual books. But that was a place where kids could go and roam pretty much at will, and you knew they were safe.
Sure. Not anymore.
Not so much.
No. And, it would be one thing if there was an adults only section of the library. You remember the video stores when you go in and there'd be the curtain in the back and everybody knew what was behind the curtain. But if you weren't 18 or, if you weren't an adult, you weren't allowed back in the porn section of the video store. Well, but that doesn't exist in a library.
One of the points that came out in the discussion, I'm sure you'll get there, is the library is divided into sections, young adults and children and all that other stuff, but there's nobody particularly patrolling or enforcing that in many places. And one of the things that was on the testimony was a kid went to check out a book because his friend had recommended it.
Yeah.
And the librarian happened to catch it and realize what it was and called his mom and stopped it. So there's some great people working there. They just need some guidance as far as what this is what's expected. This isn't. But well, I'll get out of the way.
So in Wyoming, there is I guess you would call it an exemption for teachers and for law enforcement to be able to handle obscenity type material without getting prosecuted by our obscenity statutes. And the reasoning is pretty clear, right? For law enforcement, if you're prosecuting a guy that or a girl, it's not very often that it's a woman that is involved in child porn, though I'm sure it happens. But somebody that's, producing child porn or trafficking in it, well, you have to be able to deal with it. And so Wyoming law provides an exemption, so you can't be prosecuted for, under the obscenity statute. The same thing applies to librarians, and it also applies to teachers. So they can't be sued or prosecuted because of, whatever pornography may be found in the library. So it could be as simple as, an art book that has a picture of the statue David, or to something as graphic as what they're going to talk about in this soundbite. So the first thing I want to do for you is play Representative Ann Lucas before the committee. And she's basically introducing the topic, even though everybody on that committee is already well aware of what we're talking about. So here's that video.
We're never talking about banning books. What we're talking about is correctly putting them in the right place so that the correct access is allowed. So what we're talking about here is obscenity as it relates to children. Some material is just inappropriate for children. I have for you some books. I have an assistant. He's going to hand out, please, to everybody. Just a visual aid. I went to the Laramie County Library a few days ago, and They were wonderful. Kudos to Jillian, who helped me find books. I had a list of books. And what I have here are books that were located. I found them in the Laramie County Library. And I don't want my 12-year-old to learn about anal sex or fellatio, okay? But that's what's in some of these books, and I'm not exaggerating a bit. You'll be horrified if you actually looked at some of this stuff. I think a 12-year-old could go a long time in their school career without ever seeing a book like that. Every book that you're looking at, by the way, that I got from the library was paid for with tax dollars.
Okay, so there you have the explanation of what Representative Ann Lucas is going after, and I'm telling you, my friends, these books really are horrible. I mean, I don't know of any way that we can, that you could describe them, except that they are horrible. They're very, very graphic, and I don't think that anybody, any parent in their right mind, would want their children having access to books that's going to teach them this stuff. When we come back, we're going to talk about Grand Dragon Satan Socks and what he says about porn in the library. We'll do that next.
Coin Capital, we hear from Americans across the United States who have a growing concern about the future purchasing power of U.S. paper money. Many Americans are looking for an alternative for long-term capital. For more than 35 years, the people at U.S. Coin Capital have educated American investors on how to properly accumulate United States gold and silver coins. Call us at 1-800-878-2646 or visit us on the web, uscoincapital.com.
Make sure that you subscribe and follow the Cowboy State Politics podcast. You can do that from the website, cowboystatepolitics.com, or anywhere that you get your podcasts. That way, you'll make sure that you won't miss a single episode of Cowboy State Politics.
Some say standing up for what you believe in is being extreme. Ask any woman in Wyoming. They'll tell you this is called courage. The mainstream media claims that holding the line on important issues is being unreasonable. My mom taught me this is called staying true to our principles. In other places, people argue you always have to compromise to get something done. Here in Wyoming, we know that some things are worth protecting at all costs. Some say it's time we give up on the values that made our state great to accommodate toxic culture. I say it's time to stand tall and protect the values that have served Wyoming well for over 134 years. Join Honor Wyoming as we defend and preserve the Wyoming way of life. Find out how you can make a difference today.
Visit honorwyoming.org. Welcome back to the program. David Iverson, Cowboy State Politics Live, Wyoming's most listened to political program. And it absolutely is, my friends. You can listen to Cowboy State the podcast on YouTube, Facebook, iTunes, Rumble, pretty much anywhere. Of course, you can watch the Cowboy State Politics Live program every Tuesday through Friday, beginning at 8 a.m. And pretty soon, we're going to go to a 2-hour format. So there's going to be way more Cowboy State politics than any of the Redcoats can possibly handle. So before the break, we played some video for you from the Judiciary Committee, in which Representative Ann Lucas was talking about her bill to deal with a lot of these different library books. And it's hard for the average citizen to understand exactly what we're talking about, because we've all gone through school with teachers telling us about censorship efforts of classic pieces of literature, Romeo and Juliet, Huckleberry Finn, those sorts of things. But this is not your dad's or your grandpa's books in the library. I mean, these are so far apart that it is not even describable. For example, I mentioned the ABCs of equality. Now, when a child's learning how to read, you hand them an ABC book, and it's like, A is for apple, B is for ball, C is for cat, D is for dog, and so on. Well, this book, The ABCs of Equality, which is one of the ones that was found in the library in Gillette, and I did a search when I first started covering this topic of where all of these different ideologically driven books were at in Wyoming libraries. And they were pretty much all over the place. So I don't remember exactly which library they were in. But the ABCs of Equality, you're going to love this one. It's fascinating. C is for, or G is for trans, or, gender. B is for bisexual. T is for transsexual. And you can just imagine what the rest of what the letters were. Well, so this topic has been going on for, I would say, I don't know, Agent 29, how many years do you think this has been going on? It's at least 3.
And every bit of that. And as you said, this isn't your dad's or your grandpa's.
Right.
If you had an uncle like mine, it might be one of his books.
Now, here's the other thing, right? Like all other types of pornography, and I think I mentioned this yesterday too. You have to go into the truck stop or the gas station, and the magazines, the dirty magazines, are behind the counter, and they're wrapped in black plastic, and you have to be 18 to buy them. Good question, though. Why are they wrapped in black plastic? Well, it's so that minors can't see them, because every town in America has an ordinance or a statute against obscenity. This is the very reason why you can't, go to the bathroom out in public, right? That would violate the obscenity statute. So we have those. The porn books are covered by black plastic, except if they're in the library. Now, 3 years ago, Grady Hutcherson, who at the time was the president of the Wyoming Education Association, the WEA, Wyoming's teachers union, non-union, was asked about this in a committee meeting. Let's see here. Go to cut number 2.
But I also think it's time collectively for all of us to start pushing back against some of that ridiculous national rhetoric that Ms. Amon was talking about that we're seeing. This is Wyoming, and much of that nonsense has no place in Wyoming because it's not happening in Wyoming, and it has nothing to do with our phenomenal K-12 education system in Wyoming.
All right, so that's Grady Hutcherson. That's what he says about all of the porn books that are in the library. It's just not happening in Wyoming. This is just national rhetoric. All right, so now let's fast forward to this guy named Tate Mullen. Now, Tate Mullen is the lobbyist for the Wyoming Education Association. Okay, so this picture here, this was a picture of his socks that was taken last year. And you notice there's a little demon on his socks there? Yeah, I can't remember that guy, that figure's actual name. Go ahead and throw it up there one more time. But who in their right mind has a pair of socks like that? Well, this guy is actually an avowed Satanist. I'm not even kidding. I did a podcast about it. It was not long ago on his birthday that he posted a picture of, please support the Church of Satan. So we're not exactly dealing with a quality individual here, but he's the lobbyist for the Wyoming Education Association.
They're not Buffalo wool socks.
No, they are not Buffalo Wool Company socks at all. Well, Tate Mullen was asked point blank about this material in the library in the House Judiciary Committee. Play cut number 1.
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, my name is Tate Mullen. I'm the Government Relations Director for the Wyoming Education Association.
Thank you for coming today, Mr. Mullen. Would you agree that sex acts and graphic detail like ejaculation on another person have no business in a school library?
Listen to what he
Mr.
says.
Mullen. Chairman Washit, Representative Lean, I am not the decider of that. That is a local decision that needs to be made at the community level with the parents, the community members, the educators, and the students within that community. My opinion of that is irrelevant.
Yeah. What a dishonest insert adjective there. He can't even admit that, yeah, well, this stuff's pretty horrible, because he probably agrees with it. I mean, the only reason why he would be, saying, well, this needs to be dealt with at the local level, which, by the way, it is not being dealt with at the local level. And here's the way things work. Usually we want any sort of difficulty to be handled by your city council and your county commissioners. But when they are unwilling or unable to deal with the problem, then it is up to the state legislature to deal with. And that's why the state legislature has to get involved here, because you have multiple counties across the entire state that won't deal with this. You have liberals on the school board that they actually want this stuff in the library.
It came out in testimony that there are some of these things that they can't deal with at the local level because they're statewide. I think I got the name of the program right. Is like the Libby program, where kids can subscribe online, and that the locals don't have control over, and it's infected with all sorts of garbage.
Yeah. So, I mean, and another little wrinkle here. So one of the people that is, pretty influential at the National Library Association, which, by the way, most libraries in Wyoming, even school libraries, they get a list of suggested books from the National Library Association, and they just say, well, this credible organization is recommending this book, we should order it, without ever investigating what those books are. Well, the National Library Association is, populated by a bunch of leftist radicals, and interestingly enough, until very recently, their treasurer used to be the dean of libraries at the University of Wyoming. Not even kidding, my friends. She's not there anymore, but I mean, it's interesting that, a lot of this stuff, we tend to think that it's not happening in Wyoming. By the way, hit cut number 2 again.
But I also think it's time collectively for all of us to start pushing back against some of that ridiculous national rhetoric.
It's all national rhetoric.
That Ms. Amon was talking about, that we're seeing. Yeah. This is Wyoming, and much of that nonsense has no place in Wyoming.
You're right about that.
Because it's not happening in Wyoming, and it has nothing to do with our phenomenal K-12 education system in Wyoming.
Well, the truth is, it is happening in Wyoming. It is in Wyoming, and you do have radical leftists that are absolutely in control of Wyoming libraries, in the school system. And unless the legislature steps in and does something about it, well, there's nothing to prevent your local librarian from ordering a whole bunch of books. And I want to be honest here. I want to be clear about one thing. I don't think that your average everyday librarian in the state of Wyoming is some sinister person in the back, trying to figure out which books they can order. I do think there are some of those, however. And I think a lot of it has to do with just ordering books from the National Library Association, and because they happen to be on the list. And who would say that the National Library Association isn't a credible organization? I mean, it really is pretty insidious. So anyway, there's your update from the porn books. Oh, by the way, Ken, I always forget to mention this. If you want to be part of the program, the phone number in the studio is 307-374-8989. 307-374-8989 is the phone right here in the Cowboy State Politics studio.
You may forget to mention it, but I don't forget to put it up because I got to find something to do over here.
Yeah. Well, I need to keep you busier. So anyway, if you want to be part of the show, go ahead and give me a call, 307-374-8989. Let's see here. I think. So before we move on to all of these organizations that you are a member of, let's go ahead and take our middle of the program break. And when we come back, we're going to follow up with the discussion we started yesterday about all these different associations and organizations that you're paying for your elected officials to be part of. And there's some big numbers here, my friends. I've got the spreadsheet directly from the Legislative Service Office. So we'll do that next. It's spring-ish in Wyoming. Well, what that means for the uninitiated is that it's going to be 70 degrees one day and then snow 1.5 feet the next. And really, if you don't like those two options, just wait a little bit. The weather will change. I know, it sounds a little stressful, but really you should put your mind at ease and buy a pair of socks from the Buffalo Wool Company. They'll keep you warm and dry even on the nastiest, coldest spring-ish day, and they'll keep you cool and dry even when it's 75 and sunny. To get you a pair, go to their website, thebuffalowoolco.com. Trust me, you're not going to be disappointed. Are you one of those people that said something like this before Trump became president?
I have a house in Spain that is going to be ready right after the election. Siberia. Nova Scotia. I'm definitely moving to Canada. Straight to hell. Iceland. France. Asia's pretty cool.
And has the past 5 weeks just been more than you could bear? If that's the case, you have come to the right place. All you need to do is call my friend Rebecca Bextel at Compass Real Estate. She has her fingers on the pulse of the real estate market all across the state of Wyoming. Last year, she sold around $30 million worth of property. Everything from small residential properties all the way up to big giant ranches. So if you've got to get the heck out of Dodge, if you've got to be gone Johnson because you can't stand that Trump is the president, call Rebecca Bextel. Her phone number is 307-699-3519. Let me say that one more time for you in case you missed it. 307-699-3519.
I've never felt the freedom like I do. I feel stronger every day, don't you? Well, I can show you how. A new day, a new way. Watch out, I'm only gonna get stronger. A new day, a new way. Watch out, I'm only gonna get stronger. A new day, a new way. Watch out, I'm only gonna get stronger. A new day, a new way. Watch out, I'm only gonna get stronger. I've never felt the freedom like I do. I feel stronger every day. I'm only gonna get stronger.
Cowboy State Politics is only going to expand. You can listen to the live broadcast on YouTube, Facebook, X, and on Rumble. You can get the Cowboy State Politics podcast anywhere that you get your podcasts. Welcome back to the program, my friends. I'm David Iverson, doing what I was born to do with talent given to me by God himself. It's absolutely true, my friends. You have to be proud of the gifts that you've been given. And quite frankly, I've been given a lot. And, well, all of us have. And you should be very thankful for them. So let's see here. Before we get into all of the legislative fees, let's go ahead and talk to Representative Mark Baker. Mark, welcome to the program.
Hey, how's it going?
Good, man. How are you?
Good. Hey, it's good to be on again. Thanks for having me. Thanks
Of
for doing
course.
the show.
What's on your mind?
Yeah. I didn't catch the whole part of the beginning of the show, but I heard what you were speaking about with the books, and I saw on your board there that you were talking about the justices and the judicial system, and I just wanted to make a point that our justices and our Supreme Court justices are not political token appointees. They shouldn't be political token appointees. They shouldn't be someone from the good old boy system. And really what comes to my mind is Governor Gordon, or not Governor Gordon, but he's doing it too, but Governor Meade and his appointment of his chief of staff, Justice Gray. Even though the Redcoats at that time were upset with that appointment, they were frustrated because she hadn't tried a case. A lot of the Redcoats were attorneys at that time, and even from up in your area, the former speaker, I remember him expressing frustration about that appointment. And so there really is a need for I don't know if you guys have discussed this, and I'm not following it too closely, but I know that the Freedom Caucus is making an attempt to make sure that those political appointments are vetted by the legislature, and I do think that that's an appropriate discussion now, because when we talk about these books in our libraries, as soon as the Freedom Caucus acts, there's going to be a challenge to it, and it's going to lead right to the court.
Yep, exactly right. And I was reading exactly what Chief Justice Kate Fox said yesterday. Well, it's free of politics, or it needs to be free of politics. Well, it's not, because you have political appointees choosing the candidates for the judiciary, and then you have the governor choosing from those three candidates. So how could it possibly not be political?
One of the first cases they're likely to come up with is the governor trying to say, I want to run a third time.
Yeah, maybe.
And
Yeah.
it comes to them. It just, we don't know that for certain, but how is that helpful?
I don't think it's helpful at all. What do you think, Mark?
Well, I think he's got, if he's planning on doing that, what a great way to do it. Put your pocket person on the court to argue your case.
Exactly right.
And so, I mean, that's the point of I think Governor Meade, one of his points in besides the political token of the seat itself, of the justice seat itself, was that he had gone through a pretty extensive, very controversial bill, Senate File 104, that removed the superintendent of, of our Department of Education, and so, I mean, he wanted that appointment on the court to ensure that if there was a challenge, which there ended up being, but he didn't realize it was going to be so quick and it was going to be overturned, because I was there when it happened. I remember the climate and the atmosphere and the shock in the legislature the day that the court came out and said it's been overturned.
Yep.
I'm thinking to myself, wow, we spent all this time, wasted all this effort. And when you talk about procedures, that bill was really the bill that opened my eyes to really the fact that procedure doesn't matter. And the rules can be bent and changed at any time. The fact that we're only safe if they've gavelled out, and Ken can attest to this, that at any point, any bill can be resurrected. Any bill can be, the rules can be suspended for this, rules can be suspended for that, and you can move an idea through in about 6 hours.
Well, it happened.
So,
that same thing happened in this last session. What was it? The shooting sports complex. In one day, they wrote a bill, advanced it all the way through the Senate, and then sent it over to the House and just expected that they were going to pass it. So, I agree. A lot of this process, even though we talk about it all the time, I don't know that it really matters all that much. And it further complicates things when the governor appoints, his appointed attorney general to be on the Supreme Court.
I just wanted to point out that particular bill that the Senate ramrodded through like that, when it got to the House side, even the redcoats were upset with them and thought, this is not how we work.
Yeah, exactly right. So anyway, I got to run. Mark, thanks for the call. I appreciate it. Make sure you call in anytime you like.
Yeah, thanks for having me on, and thanks for doing the show again.
Thanks, Mark. Bye.
All right. Stay bye.
All right. Former Representative Baker is exactly right. The rules are used to do whatever they want, and frankly, they do that a lot. I mean, it's absolutely outrageous that the governor appointed his attorney general, who, by the way, has never been a judge before, to be on the Supreme Court. So any suggestion by Kate Fox or the Cowboy or anybody that our justice system isn't political, they're just absolutely lying to you. All right. Yesterday, we started a discussion about all of these association dues that your local officials are, they're not paying them. You are. And it's a gigantic number. And I'm going to have more on this in the coming days and weeks. In fact, I've got some pretty interesting audio that I think everybody is going to be pretty curious about. Well, one, where I got it, and two, what's said in it. But anyway, a lot of these associations, actually almost all of them, are funded by your tax dollars. And what I'm talking about are groups like the Wyoming County Commissioners Association, the Wyoming County Clerks Association, the Clerks of District Court Association, the Treasurers Association, the Wyoming Association of Municipalities. Well, all of them are paid tremendous amounts of money, tremendous amounts of your tax dollars. So just the associations that are made up of county officials, you pay them in excess of $500,000 a year. $500,000 for your local officials to be part of a lobbying group. And that's what all these organizations are. If you look at the list of bills that were supported and opposed by the Wyoming County Commissioners Association, it's very obvious that it's a liberal group. And they want, they're pushing their own liberal agenda. A couple of those things are Historically, the County Commissioners Association has been opposed to any gun bill. And it doesn't really matter what it is. Over the past 25 years, they've pretty much opposed all of them. They are generally opposed to any sort of tax cut. They are absolutely in favor of any sort of tax increase. Why? Because it gives them more money to spend on their own pet projects. So I've also, oh yeah, and by the way, I promised you a really big list of all of the associations that you're part of. That list is already on cowboystatepolitics.com. You can go to the show content page and you can read this thing for yourself. But if you want a list of, all of the associations, let me see if you can see this in the camera. Ah, there we are. All right, let me just kind of go through this a little bit for you. I'll move my microphone. I see your page. I see your, wait, there's another page, and there's another page. And wait, there's more. There's more. Ken, does this thing ever stop?
Do you need a narrator?
I do. I don't know, man. Look at all this.
No, there's pages. This stuff, though, this isn't stuff we made up. This is directly from LSO. This is the Legislative Service Office's
own list.
Giving us information.
Yep, this is directly from the Legislative Service Office, and if you want to see it for yourself, and I highly suggest you do that. The whole thing, exactly what I'm reading from, is on cowboystatepolitics.com. But let me just give you a couple of examples here. The National Conference of Commissioners of Uniform State Laws. We have no idea what that is or what they do, but you pay them $80,000 a year. How about the National Association of, let's see here, State Auditors? By the way, our state auditor doesn't audit anything. However, we pay $7,000 a year for her to be part of that organization. Let's see here. Here's one. The Streamlined Sales Tax Governing Board. You ever heard of that one? Well, you should, because you pay them $45,973 a year. Or the National Law Enforcement Telecommunications System Incorporated. You pay them $88,000 a year. Or the Western Identification Network. You pay them $73,000. Let's see here. What else? Going through my list here. I circled a whole bunch of them. Anyway, here's another good one. The Western Interstate Commission for Higher Education. As if we already don't pay enough for our education system. You're paying $36,000 a year to those folks. Here's this one's a big one. Western Interstate Commission for Higher Education. I thought we already had one of those, but that one's $323,000. $323,000. But anyway, I mean, this list is huge, and the grand total of it is $2.789 million that you pay just for your elected officials to be part of all of this. Now, that number is in addition to the $500,000 that you're paying for your county elected officials to be part of their association. None of that has anything to do with your municipal employees. Now, you're going to love this part. So your municipal folks, I always have a hard time not putting another N in there. But anyway.
Your town folk.
Yes, evidently I am, and I don't understand, this newer math that, this giant spreadsheet has on it. Anyway, so the dues for the Wyoming Association of Municipalities, that is dependent upon the population of your community. And if you want to know what you're paying for, I've got the agenda for the Wyoming Association of Municipalities Summer Convention 2025. Yep, there it is on the screen. So one of the things that you're paying for is from 11:30 to 12, a golf and lunch. Now, the lunch is provided by the Kaiser Wealth Management. And then at 12 o'clock, a golf outing. Yep, you need to pay for your local officials to go play golf. And then if you read through it, one of those things, let's see here, where is it? Oh, yes, here we go. At 10 a.m. on Thursday, June 12th, there's a panel about the gun-free zones repeal with WASCOP Executive Director Alan Thompson and the WHAM General Counsel Timmy Stubson. Now, let me ask you a question. Riddle me this, riddle me that. Do you suppose that the Wyoming Association of Municipalities is in favor of repealing gun-free zones, or do you suppose that they're against it? I would venture a guess. In fact, I would be willing to put money on it that they're not in favor of any of it. And so all of these lobbying organizations, which, make no mistake, all of these associations are absolutely lobbying organizations. If you make one trip down to Cheyenne, you'll find out that they are arguing for and against your best interests a lot of the time. And you're paying for them. You are paying for those people to go down there and argue for tax increases and more restrictions on your guns. And I mean, the list is so long that it's honestly pretty hard to get your mind around. But anyway, there is a bill in the interim committees, and they're talking about all these association fees, and it's a big darn list. And Ken, I don't know like how we get a handle on this, except to say that we just need to cut it off at the legs. No more public money going to lobbying organizations. No more taxpayers paying for your mayor and your city council to go play golf down in Cheyenne. I don't get to play golf on the taxpayer dime. Why do they get to? Just absolutely irritating and infuriating. When we come back, more from the podcast updates. You are listening to Cowboy State Politics Live. You can listen to the program on YouTube, on Facebook, on X, on Rumble, pretty much everywhere. It's almost like I'm omnipresent. If you miss an episode of Cowboy State Politics Live, you can always go to the live replay, which is located at the website, cowboystatepolitics.com, under the live replay button. You can listen to Cowboy State Politics Live every Tuesday through Friday at 8 a.m. You can listen to the Cowboy State Politics podcast anywhere that you get your podcasts. iHeartRadio, iTunes, TuneIn, really any of them will work. But the easiest place is just to go to the website, cowboystatepolitics.com. There you can find all of the shows, as well as any of the articles that I might bring up during the course of a program. That way, if your name is Joe Biden and you can't remember if you had your pudding today, well, I probably can't help you with that, but I can definitely tell you why you should have never ran for president. And now, back to our program. Welcome back to the program. David Iverson, Cowboy State Politics Live, Wyoming's most listened to political program. Actually, it's probably definitely Wyoming's most listened to political program, without a doubt. The podcast is closing in on 350,000 downloads. Now we're getting really close to 900 episodes. Imagine that, 900 episodes of Cowboy State Politics. Well, one of those, on Saturday, I told you about how I gave you some reasons why Senate File 40 may have died in the Wyoming Senate. Now, let me just give you a quick recap if you are unfamiliar with this whole thing. So Senate File 40 was a bill that would have dealt with protests to developments. And an amendment was added to it in appropriations that dealt with this really onerous practice that's called housing mitigation fees. And what those are, essentially, is if you want to, in multiple counties in the state, if you want to build on your property, let's say you want to put in a storage unit, maybe just like a 10 by 12 storage unit that you buy from, your local, I don't know, Big R or Home Depot or whatever. Well, in these counties where these housing mitigation fees are in effect, you have to pay the county just to put something on your property. And we're not talking about like a $50 permit fee or a $100 permit fee. We're talking about thousands of dollars. in Teton County, if you want to build put one of those storage sheds on your property, it's going to cost you like 15 grand. If you want to build like a mother-in-law shed in your backyard, you're probably talking in excess of $70,000. Now, in other counties, a similar thing is going on, like right here in Sheridan County. If you want to build, pretty much anywhere, you have to get a building permit. Well, the building permit fees are 10% of the total project cost. So if you're going to put up that, I don't know, $25,000 mother-in-law building, well, then you're going to have to pay 10% of that to the county. That's another form of those housing mitigation fees.
Yeah, those are she sheds.
She shed. That's the word I was looking for. Well, anyway, an amendment was added to Senate File 40 that would have banned the use of these housing mitigation fees. And I won't lie to you, it was pretty controversial. The Democrats and the Redcoats put up a pretty good fight in the House of Representatives. The amendment was even run through the Rules Committee, and the Rules Committee in the House decided that, that this amendment was germane. Well, it made it all the way over to the Senate. And then there was some monkey business that happened. And let's just be very clear what this is. This is a very, very easy private property issue that you're taking people's money so that they can build on their own personal property. I mean, it is so clear that this should have been a no-brainer. But the bill failed. It failed concurrence in the Senate. And this is the first clue that something hinky was going on, that Democrat Senator Kangaroo Mike Giroux from Teton County was put in charge of the conference committee on Senate File 40. Mike Giroux, the senator from the very county where these onerous housing mitigation fees are happening, was put in charge of that bill. Mike Giroux decided that he wasn't going to schedule a meeting, and he was going to try to kill the bill that way. Well, in the middle of all of this, there was a fundraiser that was put together by Sheridan's Jeff Wallach, and it was to benefit the Senate Leadership PAC. And at that meeting, the topic of Senate File 40 came up. And on Saturday's edition of the podcast of Weekend Update, I played for you this soundbite. Play cut number 3.
We passed property tax reduction today, then I will say this, Mike was a big part of it. So I can feel the good in there. I can feel the conflict within, okay?
Okay, so what Salazar said is that Senator Mike Giroux was a big part of passing Senate File 69. Now, let's just talk about that just for a second. First, why would the Senate need the support of a Democrat to pass Senate File 69? There are only 2 Democrats in the Wyoming Senate. Why do you need their help with anything? You have enough people who are alleged conservative Republicans in the Senate that this should be a slam dunk. But yet, Senator Salazar, and that was Senate Vice President Tim Salazar that you heard in that soundbite, he says, well, Giroux was a big part of passing Senate File 69. Huh. Well, take that for what it is. But when he made that comment at the fundraiser, he made it in public. Yeah, it's kind of like the Ron White. I didn't want to be in public. They threw me into public. But Senator Tim Salazar was talking about Senate File 40 and Senate File 69 in a group of a lot of people going around. Now, here is what one of the people that was there said about Senator Tim Salazar's comment. Listen to this.
Exactly. We'll be able to tell you.
What Senator Salazar said, listen, Mike Drew helped us on the tax cuts. And I said, that's great. And I appreciate that. But you've got the votes. You don't need his help anymore.
Right.
Ever.
And the bill was a trade, is what he's saying.
Right.
Whoa!
Okay. And it's 40, House Bill 40.
SF.
Oh, SF.
So the bill was a trade. That's what one of the witnesses to that whole exchange said. Now, I'm not saying that person was any sort of public official or anything, but one of the people who overheard Tim Salazar said that bill was a trade. So, take that for what it is, but I think it's a clear case of there was something hinky going on in the state of Denmark in that fundraiser. And I think it's very clear that you don't need a Democrat's help to pass this. You shouldn't need it. It's a clear property rights issue, and there's no reason why it shouldn't have passed the Senate, unless, of course, you had a lot of influence from some pretty influential Democrats from Jackson, namely Liz Storer. Liz Storer is the chairman of the George B. Storer Foundation. She's got oodles and oodles of cash, and guess who her husband is? Her husband is Luther Probst. Luther Probst is on the Teton County Commission, the same people who are in charge of all of these housing mitigation fees. I'm telling you, my friends, this one stinks to high heaven, and there's another example of where there were definitely some games being played in the Wyoming Senate. So an update to the episode from Saturday. And I'm telling you, my friends, this just gets deeper and deeper. And if you all those people that say, "Oh, this sort of stuff doesn't happen in Wyoming. This isn't happening in Wyoming, and nobody's doing this sort of stuff," that's bull crap, because these games absolutely are being played. And when you take a broader look at the Senate, allegedly it's controlled by conservatives, and that's what we were told, right? Well, it's conservatives that are making deals with Democrats, and that are absolutely, I shouldn't say absolutely, but in my opinion, they're definitely trading votes. Now, there's a lot more concerning this story that we'll get to later, but it honestly, Agent 29, this sort of thing just absolutely, it makes me sad that we have these same sort of games that are being played in the Wyoming Senate, and it gets worse because you know a lot of these people. And you don't want to think that they would be the folks that are involved in this sort of thing. So anyway, I mean, pretty disappointing. And, that's just another piece to the puzzle. Well, we've pretty much burned up another busy broadcast hour on the program. There's a books to the association fees, preview of what's happening in the rest of the week. Agent 29 out of town on Friday. So on Friday's edition of Open Line Friday, we'll be doing that from the original Cowboy State Politics studio. And then, of course, tomorrow on the show, I have no idea what's happening, but I'm sure something else will come up. But for now, from the base of the Bighorns at the Cowboy State Politics studio, I'm David Iverson, and this is Cowboy State Politics.